You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Weston Williams. All right, after an injury sidelined him from a college football career, our interview guest turned to the most logical alternative: opera. His young career has already taken him to Pensacola Opera, Opera Birmingham, Fort Worth Opera, and now the world premiere of Jake Heggie and Gene Scheer's Intelligence at Houston Grand Opera. We go inside the huddle with baritone Alex DeSocio. And then it's the return of friend of the show, Ryan Speedo Green. Speedo takes a free throw on how he scored the role of Emile Griffith in the high-profile Met debut of Terence Blanchard's Champion. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, so if you cancel yourself, does that count as cancel culture? Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Spotify, you're going to click follow. Apple Podcasts, please hit that plus sign. Send us a voice memo. Email us your hot takes on what we're talking about. Mailbag@operaboxscore.com. Or you can just record your thoughts using the You Got Something to Say page on the brand new website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you're going to get the OBS beer coaster, the OBS lapel pin, and the all-new #1 OBS fan foam finger. I've seen them. They're incredible.
They're foamy?
All that. They're foamy. They're incredible. And all that is just for sharing your own hot take. Weston Williams, there he is. You and me, sir, tonight.
Oh, yeah. This is another rare sort of combination. Just George and Weston. That's another rare one. I feel like I'm in the hot spot because usually you turn things over to Oliver and he's like, here's the latest on tennis. Here's the latest that I know about tennis. It's still being played somewhere by someone.
Thank you so much for that hot take on tennis.
Roll Tide.
Oh, Lord. Chicago Bears 2-6 halfway through the season, about to open up. I believe they're playing one home game in the next 5 weeks. This team is not going to get any better. Now there's talk that Jim Harbaugh, coach of my Michigan Wolverines, might even be coming to the Bears next season. We're going to see if that's true or not. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Described by the New York Times as having a buttery, booming baritone, Alex DeSocio is a Northwestern and University of Maryland grad who has worked in many regional opera companies and is a 2-time Metropolitan Council audition semifinalist. Hey, he loves playing Dungeons and Dragons too. He joins us mid-performance at Houston Grand Opera, where he's covering the role of Travis Briggs in Jake Heggie and Gene Scheer's new opera, Intelligence. Alex DeSocio, my old friend, it's great to have you on the show.
Oh yes, my old landlord, technically, as I lived in George Cedarquist's attic when we were in Pittsburgh together that one season in 2013. It was the best. It was the best funnest year of my life up there.
I almost let you babysit my kids, man.
You let me. Well, you actually did. I think let me babysit them like once or twice when you and Elaine really wanted a date night. So I have watched your kids. I've watched your kids grow up. It's kind of incredible. So,
buddy, we've known each other a long time. We first met at Northwestern. I was in the grad program. You were the undergrad program. But even before we met, you had gone to Northwestern, really, I believe, thinking football.
Yeah, I mean, a lifetime ago, literally at this point, like 20 plus, almost 20 years. Actually, 20 years ago, I was offered a scholarship. I was, and I verbally committed to Northwestern when I was 16 years old, sophomore at Wichita Collegiate High School, and I verbally committed to Northwestern. And then my body proceeded to say no. I blew up my shoulder. My ankle had to get reconstructed. My shoulder was reconstructed.
Oh God!
My hip is still not great. I mean, it's one of those things I'm paying for it now. Just that high school football. God forbid if I actually played in college. Yeah, and so I was planning on going to school for because I was just trying to find a way to sneak into a good school so I could get a real degree, like engineering. Because I knew my grades were good enough, but they weren't good enough by themselves. And so with football, when football didn't work, I was like, what else can I do that sneak into a really good university? And that was singing. I was like, I can scream good. Somebody will give me a scholarship to get into school.
But how much singing had you done before Northwestern?
How much singing had I done before? Oh, a lot. See, I went to a school that I went to a private K through 12 secular college preparatory school that you had to sing from kindergarten through your freshman year of high school. You didn't have a choice. And most of us took it through, I would say more than half of people took it through senior year. And then you could also switch to orchestra or band. But I stayed with singing the whole time. So I had sung a bunch. I mean, I had done musicals. I had taken dance training. I had never had a lead at that point, but I had minor roles. Like the jailer or something in Les Mis, where I had like one little scene. I mean, it was one of those things where like I had like experience, but I was like, hey, I could probably parlay this into a scholarship somewhere. And luckily, my parents had the resources, and my school had the resources to get me in contact with great singers and great teachers in New York primarily. So I ended up having to do a lot. I actually would fly to New York once a month to study with Barbara Conrad, David Kelso, and literally like fly up there. They'd be like, "Hey, fix all this crap," and then send me home. And then I had to fix it fix it on my own. And then when I got back, they'd be like, "That sounds great," or "That sounds awful."
I mean, buddy, so Northwestern, Maryland, Pittsburgh, the list goes on for you. The Met Council auditions, and now this world premiere, Jake Heggie, Gene shares its intelligence, is the new show. I want to start kind of top down on this one. And as a director, of course, I always think the director's at the top. But for this show, it's two roles in one person. It's choreographer and director Jarole Willa Joe Zolar. What's that process been like?
I mean, again, the weird thing about covering, because we came in, they'd already been here like 2.5 weeks staging before even the cover showed up. So by the time we got here, the whole show was pretty much staged. So we didn't get to see like the nitty gritty of that stuff being done. But what I did see is like, it was more about framing the singers on the stage, if that makes sense. So like she would use the dancers basically as all the motion for the stage. And the singers really almost did like an old school park and bark. So they had minimal, they really didn't have, other than like the fights and we'll call it the not fun, spicy scene in Act 2 with Travis Briggs and Mary Jane. But like other than those scenes, it pretty much was like she would just use the singers as the static aspect and use the dancers as the motion. It was really, for the singers, it was almost like more like a park and bark. And so, me being used to modern directing and modern staging of like singers jumping around and doing backflips and doing difficult staging, to go back to like almost like an old school, like out and about, sit in a chair, look out. It was kind of, I was wondering, like, is this going to work for a modern audience? But then once you put it with the projections and the stage and the dancers and the costuming, it actually worked extremely well.
Awesome.
It was really good for your old football injuries too, I imagine.
Oh God, yeah. So, I mean, that being said, then Travis has like the 2 fight scenes in the show. And then also kind of a physical scene with Mary Jane in Act 2. So yeah, it was good. I mean, there was a day I was like, it was pretty much just 2 hours of sweating for the fight scene. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about fight scenes. You are apparently, I did not know this until, maybe an hour or so before when I was like looking over the information here. You are apparently the only opera singer certified as an actor combatant in the Society of American Fight Directors. Is that true?
That is correct. Now, at the time, I've been told there has been one other person to get the certification. I've been told there's one other, but I don't. I'm the only one, from my knowledge, because I was the only one that they've ever dealt with, and it became very obvious when I was down there at the national, like their national thing they do in. Normally they do it in like South Carolina, but this one was done in at Louisiana Tech,
right.
it was weird because it was like I was like, hey, so I was learning all the things. Like, oh, by the way, so we have to do this scene at the end. You have to do like these complicated scenes where you have to do like full dialogue, and it has to be X long. And they actually judge you as much as you're acting as they judge the combat itself.
Right.
And I remember being like, I have not been trained in any of this. I haven't done a legitimate scene in a decade and my master's program. And they're like, yeah, you'll be fine. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. I won't be fine. I was like, can I just sing my parts? And they're like, no, you can't. I'm like, okay. And they were very confused because I thought it was like purely based on like what your technical aspect was. They're like, no, you can be perfect and we'll still like, if you do all your moves correctly, we'll just pass you. But you have to be a good actor to get like the better pass. I'm like, oh, so I'll just pass. We'll be fine. I'm good then. Great. And so, yeah, but I'm the only guy. It's like, and it takes forever. I mean, we were there for 12. No, when doesn't 12 weeks? I'm sorry. We were there for 3.5 weeks. And then and they'll fail. And it was like 7 hours a day. And they failed just under half of the group. So you go there, you pay $3,000, and you could literally fail. And because they won't accept you because they have such high standards.
Well, it's like being in an aria competition. The skills that you learned, though, with Society of American Fight Directors. So going back to intelligence, like, has that come into some of the fight calls that you've done?
Oh yeah, because the good thing, when you work at companies at this level, HGO, I mean, they have a guy by the name of Luke here. I forget his last name, but he's their fight director. He's a fight director in the Society of American Fight Directors. And so I was like, hey, just I'm certified. And he was like, what? I was like, what do you mean you're certified? I've never met a singer who's certified. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm the only one. And he's like, well, then you're going to be a lot of help when we get to the cover staging of this. I was like, yeah, I will be, because I'll be like, you'll just tell me and I'll just do it. And that was the thing, is like, and the thing what happened was actually, it's a fun story about that, is that when we were doing our cover staging, they wanted to change to the actual staging for the fight. They didn't like the executive director and like the team here didn't like how it was looking on stage, and it did look a little weird. And so they were like, hey, could you just change it? And Luke and I literally was like, all right, let's figure this out. And so we literally figured out the new staging together on the fly for like an hour during our cover staging. And then we just threw that, and that was what we did for them. They did a slight variation of one of the things we did. And it was just like, yeah. But no, for me, it's easy because I know how to fall. I know how to grab somebody without hurting them or myself. It's one of those things there's not a lot of explaining. It's more of like, hey, I just need to stack here. You need to go up to down. You go 1 to 5. Like there's this terminology you can just use when you go through the society, and you get certified, because then it's just like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that's more opera singers should be certified by SFAD.
No, they shouldn't. We want DeSocio to be the only one. We don't want other opera singers.
That's true.
No, I would largely prefer, because I can't tell you how many times even before I got certified, that I'd be in a fight, and then there'd be some guy, some tenor or some whatever would just be like, oh, we'll just figure it out. I'm like, no, we won't.
I have seen some.
You're gonna hurt me, and he's like, no, we'll figure it out. And then you get punched or kicked. I
have seen some bad, unsafe-looking fight scenes, even on very really big, prestigious opera stages. So, I think this is great. I completely support your certification as an actor who has been in some shows where maybe people were not fighting as they should. I feel very safe with you.
Yeah, and again, thank you for that. And I think every singer should. Every singer that should get Luke and I were talking about, we think that they should come up with a singer version of the actor combatant, where you get certified in, because we don't use their main 3 they do, which is broadsword, rapier and dagger, and unarmed. As singers, we use I would say we use unarmed, dagger, and single sword the most. And I think it would be really beneficial to have a singer fight workshop of these are the 3 things you're going to use all the goddamn time, and but again, it'd be expensive, and then singers you have to get it involved, and it's gonna I'd have to go get a teaching certification and 2 other more certifications, I guess, to get to the level of where we could do it. And it's a huge hassle, especially when I'm trying to make money and sing. So
Other names on the intelligence opera at HGO, Janae Brugger and Michael Mays. You've been hanging out with them. What's something that you might have learned or gleaned about the business from one of those two?
no, Janai, I haven't talked much with Janai because she's the lead in the show. She's like the Susanna, where it's like her name's not in the lights, if you will, but she starts the show, she ends the show. She has like 3 arias. She doesn't really leave the stage, and so I haven't gotten to get to know her because mostly she's been like, I have to go home. I'm very tired. I'm like, oh, okay, bye. It's nice to meet you. Now, Mike, on the other hand, I mean, Mike and I have known each other for, I think I met Mike back all the way in like 2015 or 16 at Fort Worth for like a gala concert thing. And I've worked with his wife, Megan, several times. But Mike, Mike and I have just kind of, it's more of like, Mike and I talk like politics and like, football, and we just more like hang out. And Mike actually had everybody over for the first week we were there when all the covers were there. We had this huge barbecue at his sister's house in the middle of nowhere, and he smoked like 2 briskets, ribs, boudin, and like a bunch of other. It was amazing.
Oh, that
it was
sounds
like, and they had a
great.
band, and he had a blues band. A friend of his has a blues band. They had a blues band that he sang in for a little bit. It was great. Oh, it was amazing.
That sounds
That is amazing.
utterly
was great.
delightful.
Oh, it was completely delightful. I mean, and the only thing, I think I've just learned from Mike just by watching him. I mean, Mike is a guy who's really, I don't think he ever got a young artist program. Other than I think he went for Santa Fe one summer for a cup of coffee. But I don't think he's ever won a big competition. I don't think, he didn't go to, I don't think he even has a master's, if memory serves me right. I don't think I don't think he has a master's. I think he just has an undergrad. I mean, Mike's just one of those guys you watch and go, that's like the preeminent thing of like, the thing we get told a lot in the opera business is like, as long as you stick it out and don't piss people off and you're good enough, you'll have a career.
And as long as you come on Opera Box Score, you will have a career guaranteed.
Oh, guaranteed. Like, that's it. Like, it just, here it is. I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. I'm going to go like my Met debut next season. No, that's not true. That's not true. But no, Mike is like the epitome of a guy who's a great singer and just stuck it out for like 15 years before he actually got recognition. Like, kind of like an Alan Held. Alan Held kind of did a similar thing where he, like, for 10 years was just struggling. And then he got the Wolf Trap, and then he got WNO, and then he got the Met. It's just people who just sticking it out. That's what I've learned from him. So, and that's what I'm, kind of done as well. But except I had some more competition wins and some other stuff to buoy my bank account. So,
Alex, when you're not singing, I know you're a big Dungeons and Dragons fan, and Dungeon Master, is that the right word?
Yeah, we're like, they call it DMs is like the normally I was like, well, I DM a game, I run a game type of thing.
And forgive me, but I think during the pandemic, this was like a revenue stream for you.
Yeah, it was my only income during the pandemic. Because during the pandemic, I tried to apply for unemployment, and the problem is you had to apply for unemployment because for the 1099 employees, you could finally file for unemployment. The only problem was you had to file in the state you last worked in, and that state for me was Florida. And so then I applied through, and Florida was a mess. First it was like the thing was always down, and then once you got through it, they're like, we reject you. You need to come into like the office and meet with one of our people to get your money. I'm like, I live in Colorado. And they're like, well, that's what you're going to have to do. And I was like, oh, so I have no money and no way of making money right now. So I was like, you know what? I want to run Dungeons & Dragons professionally. And it started off slow, but eventually I had like 7 to 9 groups, and I was making like $1,000 a week running Dungeons & Dragons out of my home.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was truly insane. It made no sense. And then once the opera started coming back, I started telling certain groups like, hey, when this campaign's over, we're done. And, and some of them were moving anyway, so that made it convenient. And so now I just have the 3 that I run now. And so I still run them now. So when I go home, I have to run a bunch of Dungeons & Dragons when I get back, because I've been gone for like 6 weeks here. and they've already been texting me like, so when are we playing again? I'm like, guys, I'm back in like a week. Just give me a minute, okay?
You can use your experience in opera in D&D. This is a true story about me. My first ever DM campaign, which my DM quit on because I was such a bad player. I based my player character. I was a bard that I based loosely on the composer Arnold Schoenberg, and that was a terrible idea.
Especially when there's better options.
Yes. Again, it was my first time. I did not know what I was doing, but there is always an opportunity. There's always a crossover somewhere. So I believe in you.
That is true. I mean, there is. I mean, all the arts are incestuous in their own ways, I guess, including Dungeons and Dragons.
It's so true. Robert Watson, who was on the show a couple weeks ago and was at Marilla with us, is also a big Dungeons and Dragons player.
I completely believe that. Rob always came off as a huge nerd to me, so that does not surprise me at all. The question is, he plays in Europe, so I wonder if he plays in German or not. So,
buddy, before we let you go, give us a quick hot take on some sports. Northwestern Wildcats, obviously huge drama in the off season with allegations of sexual abuse, hazing. This team has struggled in the Big Ten this year. What's the first step to rebuilding and trying to get back on track?
Oh, they're not. They're done. That's my hot take. The hot take is they're done. And they're not. And the thing is, they're not even done because, I mean, don't get me wrong. This was like the death nail of like, they treat like the whole situation was not done well. Now Fitzgerald is suing the administration for false, wrongfully terminated lawsuit. The rumor is they're not even going to build the stadium anymore because they don't think they're going to be able to get the funds for it anymore. Right. And then the other thing is with NIL deals, Northwestern is not going to spend $1 million on a quarterback. You're not going to have good teams anymore. That's just the way it is.
Baritone Alex DeSocio has roles coming up in The Magic Flute and American Soldier later this year. The moment he is literally mid-performance at Houston Grand Opera covering the role of Travis Briggs in the new Jake Heggie and Gene Scheer opera Intelligence. Buddy, so great to talk to you again. And God, you make me laugh every time.
Hey, that's my job. It's I played a lot of fools in my career, and now I'm transitioning into the American white guy racist. So that's my new thing. As I'm like Travis Briggs in American Soldier, I'm literally just playing American white racist for the year. So and Papageno. So I guess there's also that. So
we'll wrap it up with the excerpt from Jake Heggie's Moby Dick. This is Starbucks aria. Alex DeSocio with pianist Sky Lee. A little bit of sports talk before we start throwing free throws. Of course, time for an update from Tobias Wright, former friend of the show. He writes to me, Dearest George. You know this is going to go well when he opens like that. It is with great shame that I write to you regarding our most recent matchup in the Opera Philadelphia Fantasy Football League. We have a feisty team thus far in the season and have battled to stay at 500 and middle of the pack with creative roster management and a bit of luck. This week, however, the football gods did not smile upon us, as our projected scores were not met by 7 of our 9 performers. It was a blowout defeat at the hands of the team called Delco Dumpster Fire, led by a Herculean effort from Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. And as we enter into this next week of the long season, we stand with a record of 3-4, and in 9th place, my sincerest regards, Toby.
See, these kinds of results are why we couldn't have him on the show anymore.
Never a true word
Toby.
spoken.
If you got your act together, if we were on top, maybe we'd consider letting you back into the fold. But right now, got to keep Matt.
Swish.
Free throw.
In October, friend of the show Ryan Speedo Green made his debut with the Chicago Philharmonic, singing a concert of arias that traced his career from supporting roles like Colleen and La Boheme to being the Mets poster boy for last season's Champion, a rare lead vehicle for a bass baritone of any race. Speedo joined Oliver for an interview for his other job, but shares this inspiring story of how he pulled himself out of depression and positioned himself to become a household name in our industry.
What would you say are the highlights of your career for yourself since you kind of splashed onto the scene in 2018 with your book and with the 60 Minutes profile? What do you count as the benchmarks?
Yeah, I mean, for me, 2019 was awesome because I got to be in, Porgy and Bess at the Met, opening that season, and winning my first Grammy with being a part of Porgy and Bess's Jake, and being able to sing with one of my childhood idols, Eric Owens, who is if anybody's career would I want to, I've been compared to a lot of other African American singers. Who first of all, look nothing like me, and some of them don't even sound like me. I once got called Larry Brownlee. That was funny. No, seriously, I'm not even joking. What I've never been called or compared to is Eric Owens, and he is one of the greatest musicians, not just African American, but the greatest musicians I've ever met in my life. He gave me some of the greatest advice as a young singer, and pushed me to push myself in a sense of like believing that I'm capable of more than what I thought I was capable of. And to be a part of a show with him in such a huge moment for the Met, to be performing that show in I don't know how many years with the all-star cast that was Angel Blue and LaTanya and the whole gang. It felt like an invitation to the picnic. Like in that kind of moment, being able to like be a part of that. And also it's my first time performing with Denise Graves, whom is the reason why I'm even singing opera. And that for me was huge as personally.
In what show?
Porgy and Bess. Okay. I was Jake in that. Yeah. And so after that, I will argue that the greatest moment of 2020 was the birth of my second son, Aeneas, because 2020 pretty much sucked for everybody. I'm not gonna lie. I lost all my gigs, almost lost my home. Yeah, I went into a huge depression. It was one of the worst years of my life. But it was also the biggest trial of me as a man, as a husband, as a father. And I was able to overcome my depression. I was able to overcome my feelings of inadequacy as a man and as a father and as a caretaker because of having no work and being jobless. And I pushed myself to, if I could work on my voice, I'd work on other things, and I started working on my body, which happened to be perfect timing for 2021, which is where I was able to, how do you say, I forget what the old saying is, when your time comes, you have to be ready kind of thing. Mm-hmm. When your number's called, you have to be ready. And I was at the Met, I was performing, in Fire Shut of My Bones as Uncle Paul, and a phone call came, and my manager was like, Speedo, how quickly could you relearn Varlam and Boris? Because I had sung it like 5 years before at the Wiener Staatsoper. And I told him, how much time do I have? and I told him anything is possible with enough coachings. And I was able to relearn and be ready to sing off book on stage in like 3 days. And I sang, I ended up jumping in at the Metropolitan Opera, singing Varlam and Boris, on top of singing Uncle Paul and Fire Shut My Bones, on top of singing Jake in Porgy and Bess, on top of covering Crown in Porgy and Bess, on top of covering Eric Owens and the Verdi Requiem, on top of singing Colline and La Boheme, and on top of singing Truffaldino and Ariadne auf Naxos at the same time. And this all happened. It was like almost like when a boulder rolls down a hill, snowball into a avalanche, where I went from being, pretty well, pretty known at the Metropolitan Opera to being sort of a little bit of a household name overnight because of the amount of people who were seeing me on stage of the Met.
You were the house bass.
Yeah, and it wasn't something that was planned. Believe me, it was something that was planned. I just happened to, my number was called, and it was sort of a perfect storm of Thomas Lausmann. Yeah. Thomas Lausmann, who was the Studienleiter at the Wiener Staatsoper when I was there, became the Studienleiter at the Met. I guess the head of music at the Met. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the exact terminology is in English. Became head of music at the Met. And he literally started it was his first year like actually working, because when he got the job in 2020, obviously you know what happened in 2020. He didn't work very much, but in 2021 he knew, from knowing my work ethic and knowing what I was capable of in the system in Wiener Staatsoper, where they do 51 operas a season, and how I had done in 4 years at the Wiener Staatsoper, I had sung over 42 roles and over 250 performances on the stage. That he knew that learning and singing, 7 roles in like 4 months would be nothing. And it showcased, and it impressed enough people in the administration that Peter Gelb came to me and told me, like, hey, I think you're ready for a lead role. And I told him, if you think so. and he's like, how would you like to be the lead and champion? And I the first thing that came out of my mouth without even thinking is I told him, Mr. Gelb, I promise you that, you give me this role, I will make sure not only that I sing it to the best of my abilities, but I will look the part, and I will be physically and mentally in the right space to be able to portray this kind of boxer on stage. And when I met with Terence in the next couple of days afterwards, to talk about it, I told him the same thing. It's like, I will not let this moment pass me by, because this is a dream I never imagined I would have. I was happy and completely fine and completely great with singing Uncle Paul and Fire. Like, that to me was amazing, to be a part of the first African American composer opera sung and performed at the Met. For me to be a part of that was, for me, once in a lifetime type of thing, to be the first to be a part of that, and to get an opportunity to portray one of a major character in one of his other operas, the lead role in one of his other operas. I wouldn't take this chance lightly, and I told him that, and I was like, I will do everything in my power to make sure that I represent your music and the character that you wrote, and put myself every bit of myself into it. And I hope that I was able to do that.
You hide the heart somewhere inside. You hear it beat, you hear it sing. It cries and talks to you, and tells you what you feel is what you feel inside. It makes you strong, or does it make you weak outside? You hide your soul somewhere inside. You feel it pull, you feel it lift. It carries you and takes you where you know you have to go and love. And love is in this soul and in this heart. It makes you strong inside, or does it make you weak?
Ryan Speedo Green singing young Emile's aria, What Makes a Man, from the Met's production of Terence Blanchard's Champion. Next week, Speedo is in residence at Florida State University before he embarks back to Germany, where he'll make his role debut as Heinrich in Lohengrin for the Deutsche Oper Berlin. Thanks to Chicago Philharmonic for coordinating the interview with our friend Speedo. You can coordinate with us. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes. Mailbag at operaboxscore.com. Super simple. Or you can even just record your thoughts. Use that You Got Something to Say page on the website, operaboxscore.com. Right now, 2-minute drill.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Friend of the show, Lydia Yankovskaya is stepping down from her role as music director of Chicago Opera Theater. Her final performance with the company will be Shostakovich's The Nose this December. She will continue involvement with COT via its Vanguard initiative, the training and residency program for first-time opera composers.
The Cambridge University Opera Society in England has canceled an upcoming production of Handel's Saul over concerns that its themes might upset audiences due to the catastrophe in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Said director Max Mason, quote, "The unfolding situation in the Middle East has shocked and appalled all people around the world, and especially those who have some personal connection to the region. Given the parallels of the oratorio's plot to this conflict, we came to the unanimous conclusion that we cannot continue."
The Grand Théâtre de Lisieux will use an intimacy coordinator for its upcoming production of John Adams' Antony and Cleopatra, believed to be the first time such a position has been employed by a company in Spain. That's according to The Guardian. Ida O'Brien, the intimacy coordinator for the production, said producers initially questioned her involvement, arguing in her words, quote, "We haven't had this before, and we don't really think we'll need it."
Houston Grand Opera will partner with Apple Music Classical to share new recordings of operas as well as remastered releases from its back catalog. Said HGO General Director and CEO Corey Dastor, quote, "We're thrilled to expand our programming to a worldwide audience through our strong new partnership with Apple, whose commitment to excellence and innovation is in perfect alignment with our own long history." The first release will be a remaster of the 2011 production of Dead Man Walking, with Joyce DiDonato and Frederica von Stade.
In an update to the drill story about women being disenfranchised in Australia's opera scene, Joe Davies' inaugural season as Artistic Director of Opera Australia will bring increased opportunities for women as conductors and directors. The new season will also feature 5 contemporary operas, including 4 by Australian composers.
A century after her birth, Maria Callas has been honored with a new museum in Greece. The city of Athens inaugurated the Maria Callas Museum last week, located next to the city's cathedral and with a view of the Acropolis.
Oh.
The museum offers a recreated room of her Paris apartment, recordings of live performances, of her teaching at the Juilliard School, and exhibits of her costumes.
In trade news, for the first time in 43 years, Pacific Opera Victoria has a new artistic director. Brenna Corner was hired following an international search to replace founding artistic director Timothy Vernon.
Sarah Myers will become the next artistic director of On-Site Opera, succeeding co-founder Eric Einhorn. Myers has been on the directing staff of the Met for over a decade, as well as having worked at other regional opera companies.
Florida Grand Opera has announced that Maria Todaro will serve as the company's interim general director through the 2023-2024 season. The mezzo-soprano has worked as a stage director with Minnesota Opera, Atlanta Opera, and Hawaii Opera Theater.
Nadine Sierra made history at the Bilbao Opera last week, encoring the audience after an aria in Gounod's Romeo et Juliette. She received a rousing ovation following her initial performance and then got a chance to give the first bis in her career.
On the disabled list, Sandra Radvanovsky has withdrawn from Paris Opera's Turandot due to illness. Tamara Wilson, Irene Thiorin, and Anna Perozzi will share the title role throughout the production. And citing illness as well, Matthew Polizzani has canceled his performance at yesterday's Richard Tucker Gala.
And on this day, October 30th, in 1733, it's the first performance of Handel's opera Semiramide. 1753, first performance of Rameau's Daphne et Aigle in Fontainebleau. 1821, probably a double bill, Mercadante's Andronico and also Elise e Claudio. 1880, the first premiere of Offenbach's opera comique Belle Lurette, which was later completed by Delibes. Into the 20th century, 1918, the first performance of Siegfried, Wagner's Sonnenflammen in Darmstadt. 1925, the first performance of Lehar's Paganini opera in Vienna. 1946, the birth of Belgian countertenor and conductor René Jacobs in Ghent. In 1955, the birth of French baritone François Leroux in Rennes. And closing out the century, 1983, the first performance of Hans Werner Henze's Oedipus der Tyrann in Kindberg. In 2000, the first performance of Aribert Reimann's Bernarda Alba's House in Munich. And on this day in 2023, well, that's today, it's the opening of the 2023 Operalia quarterfinals in Cape Town, South Africa. And that's your 2-minute drill.
Just heard a little bit of René Jacobs singing. Of course, now he's much more well known as a conductor. But back in the start of his career, he was a countertenor, which I did not actually know somehow, even though I literally have recordings of him in my library somewhere. But let me just say, George Cedarquist with the On This Day? Has that ever happened before?
It's very, very rare. It's very rare, and I nailed it. I have to admit, what a great On This Day. These were Henze, Reimann, Mercadante, Lehar. These are just such great composers. I mean, they're all a little bit random. Maybe not Lehar, but Henze, Reimann. The only person missing from that trio is Detlev Glannert.
Ah, yes, good old Detlev. Sorry to all you Detlev stands out there. He was not born today. And then, of course, the Operalia report will be next week when we know more, because obviously we record these in advance and we don't know what the outcome will be. But the finals will be Sunday at 5 p.m. Central European Time, or noon Eastern Standard Time. It'll be streamed on Medici.tv and Facebook.
It's just the Operalia competition is so, I'm going to use the word bittersweet, which is not the right word for it, right? Obviously, this is the competition, first of all, funded by Rolex watches.
Bizarre.
And driven artistically by Placido Domingo. So already we're into like big luxury goods and a singer whose track record is dubious at best. At the same time, it is the big European opera competition. Forget your international opera awards. This is huge. It's streamed on TV. So, like, should we be talking about Operalia? Should we not be talking about Operalia?
I mean, I think it is an important competition. I think the association with Placido is unfortunate. With any luck, he'll be struck by lightning and they can just proceed forward without him. I think that's the best case scenario. Rolex, I mean, whenever I go to the opera and I see a Rolex ad, I'm like, wow, you know how to make a poor man feel uncomfortable, my friend. But if we want to take their money, whatever. I don't care.
I want to get to the point where I go to the opera and I open up my program and it just says, Arby's, we have the meats.
Honestly, like if Lyric Opera Chicago got rid of Invesco QQQ and got Arby's in there, I would be so on board. I mean, it would be a bold move for Arby's, but I think they could probably spin it.
Man, I'd be sitting in the stairwells eating curly fries with horsey sauce.
That's part of the contract. They have to have, at intermission, they have to have the roast beef sandwiches ready to go. Oh, goodness. That's a greasy time at the opera.
Oh, I'm going to wipe my fingers on the carpets. Lydia Yankovskaya stepping down at Chicago Opera Theater.
Yes.
And, this is a change. This is a biggie, and I think next week we will get a swings and misses segment going on her tenure there. Of course, she comes up on the roster at Opera Australia.
Yeah, it's true. She's going to be conducting Il Tridico at Opera Australia. Ironically, not one of the new operas we were talking about, or by contemporary composers, but there are some good ones in this season, but they're bringing in female conductors: Jessica Cotis, Lydia, as you said, Zoe Zeniodi, who I do not know. Teresa Riviero Boehm is going to be in conducting Magic Flute. We also have female directors as well: Imara Savage and Louise Sarks, Sarah Giles, Kate Gall, Lindy Hume. This is honestly fantastic, and it really does feel like a direct response to that article we shared a few weeks ago. That was basically, wow, there's no one behind the scenes at opera who is not a cis white man.
Yeah, really.
So this is really great. I'm really excited about this.
Do come back next week, y'all, so we can do a swings and misses on Lydia. That's not going to be something you'll want to miss. Cambridge University Opera Society cancels its upcoming production of Handel's oratorio Saul. Now, yes, we can all say that, George here can't name 5 operas by Handel. But look, Saul, we can debate how often this is done or not. Here's what's, I think, important to know about this story. So first of all, this was the director himself, and it sounds like the production team, the cast even, quoted as a unanimous conclusion to cancel this show. My understanding is that there was nothing in the visual language of the production that made reference to Israel, Palestine, the Gaza Strip, Hamas, this dreadful war that continues to afflict this region. So it feels to me like these folks are too smart for their own good, essentially, right? And it's like, there they are over in Cambridge, and they're self-canceling because they're ahead of the audience. They're basically saying the work that we've done, we can see the parallels to what's happening in the world right now, and so we're just going to call this thing off.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm not familiar enough with Saul, not to sound too much like George here, but I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of Handel operas either that I probably should. But I can't imagine that it would be, I had the same reaction, like unless the production has been updated to like the 21st century, I don't really see how this one could be that concerning compared to a myriad of other operas that are going on that you could easily draw parallels toward, Yeah. If this was Death of Klinghoffer, I could see see that one, But it's kind of a strange decision. I mean, like, I do tend to say, trust the artist sometimes on these sorts of calls, but my gut says it probably wasn't necessary either.
Sometimes these worlds align, and they can align without colliding. You can have works of art, and the times around them can shift all of a sudden, and all of a sudden, it's not that they become relevant, they were always relevant, but just the spheres align, and it can be done in a way that is provocative, questioning, but tasteful and not upsetting. And it feels like everyone was a little... You talk about trigger warnings. Everyone was a little bit itchy on the trigger finger here to cancel this.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, but we'll never know because it's not going on.
43 years is a long time in anything. 43 years is a long time in playing a professional sport and coaching a team. So Timothy Vernon, who founded Pacific Opera Victoria, which is in the western part of Canada, 43 years, that is a long run.
I wouldn't know. I mean, I'm told by Oliver Camacho that it's but a blink of an eye, but, I'm not 700 years old, so I can't comment on that.
Let us wrap this show up.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call as a way to wrap things up this week, and we will start with Weston Williams because I have no choice.
Yes, I can really monopolize my time here, really sort of luxuriate in the fact that I didn't actually think of a good call until this moment. But that's okay because, I was going through my CD collection this week and I was doing some digging. I'm finally cataloging all of the things that I have in my collection because, as we know, Apple Music is making a real break for classical music. They're trying to corner the market. So I was on purpose trying to see how many operas and pieces of music I had that were not available on Apple Classical, and it was a disturbingly high number. I'm really, I think my bad call is just, don't let the big corporation take all the opera. Don't depend on it too much. Keep that little stash of extra special operas just for yourself. I don't think you're going to regret it, but maybe you will when you run out of space in your pantry, as I have.
Ashley's got a good call, which we're also going to put on the website. It's a YouTube clip of Jonas Kaufman with baritone and TikTok sensation Babatunde Akinboboye driving around doing karaoke. About 18 minutes long. I think it was shot in Berlin, probably. You can check that out. I have a good call. It's a bit of a pat on the back. For some reason, my son really wanted to hear the episode from last year when we ranked all of the NFL intro jingles.
Oh, yes.
And so we went back to the archives. It turns out it was almost a year ago, or over a year ago, October 20th, 2022. It's a great 10-minute segment. And the poor boy's head sort of exploded by listening to all these things. And he couldn't believe that John Williams himself had written an intro.
I couldn't either. I get it, kid.
That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard and find links to stuff we've talked about at the website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you're going to put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS on the Support the Team page. Hey, Amy and Mark in New York City gave. They're getting merch, and they very much appreciated our good call on Dead Man Walking. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is Weston Williams. For our guests, Alex DeSocio and Ryan Speedo Green, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you play Dungeons and Dragons. We're back with an all-new show next week when Lisa Davidson takes a free throw on the role of Yennefer and her lyric opera of Chicago debut. Lisa Davidson on OBS! Plus you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more coordinated intimacy. Join us.